The morning sun was just starting to peek through the blinds at Rosie's diner when Maya Thompson pushed open the employee entrance at exactly 5:45 a.m. She was early, like always. Her grandmother used to say that being on time meant you were already late, and that lesson had stuck with her through the years. Maya tied her apron around her waist and checked her reflection in the small mirror by the time clock. At 24 years old, she had the kind of face that naturally smiled even when she was tired. And boy, was she tired today. She'd been up until 2 in the morning studying for her anatomy exam, her textbooks spread across her tiny kitchen table in her studio apartment. But you wouldn't know it by looking at her. She'd learned a long time ago that customers didn't want to see her struggles. They wanted their coffee hot, their eggs cooked right, and a friendly face to start their day. Rosie's diner sat right off Interstate 40, about 30 miles outside Nashville. It was the kind of place that had been around forever, with red vinyl booths that had been patched more times than anyone could count, and a jukebox in the corner that still played actual records. The walls were covered with old photographs of country music stars who'd stopped by over the decades, back when Nashville was smaller and everyone knew everyone. Maya had been working here for 3 years now, ever since she'd made the decision to go back to school for nursing. The pay wasn't amazing, but Rosie was flexible with her schedule, and the tips were decent enough to help cover her tuition at the community college. She was taking classes part-time, which meant it was going to take her longer to get her degree, but she was determined. Her grandmother had always told her that education was the one thing nobody could ever take away from you. The smell of coffee brewing filled the air as Maya started her opening routine. She filled the sugar dispensers, made sure all the salt and pepper shakers were full, and checked that each table had enough napkins. It was the little things that mattered in this business. She'd learned that from watching Rosie herself, who'd been running this place for almost 40 years. By 6:30 a.m., the first customers started trickling in. There was old Joe, a trucker who stopped by every Saturday morning like clockwork. He always sat at the counter and ordered the same thing: 2 eggs over easy, bacon crispy, wheat toast, and black coffee. Then came the Henderson family, who liked the big booth by the window. Their 3 kids always ordered chocolate chip pancakes, and Maya had learned to bring extra napkins without being asked. The morning rush was steady but manageable. Maya moved between tables with the kind of efficiency that only comes from doing something hundreds of times. Pour coffee, take orders, deliver food, clear plates, repeat. Her feet were already starting to hurt in her worn-out sneakers, but she'd learned to ignore that too. New shoes weren't in the budget this month, not with her textbook costs. Around 9:30, things started to slow down a bit. That's when Maya noticed the man in the corner booth. He'd come in quietly, so quietly that she almost hadn't seen him sit down. He was wearing a black baseball cap pulled low and a simple gray hoodie, despite it being warm outside. Something about him seemed familiar, but she couldn't quite place it. Nashville attracted all types, so she'd gotten used to not staring at customers, even when they looked vaguely recognizable. When she approached his table, he looked up and smiled. It was a warm smile, the kind that reached his eyes. "Good morning," he said, his voice deep and friendly. "Morning. What can I get you to drink?" Maya asked, pulling her order pad from her apron pocket. "Coffee would be great, thank you. Black, no sugar." "You got it. Need a minute with the menu, or do you know what you'd like?" He glanced at the laminated menu briefly. "I'll take the breakfast special. Scrambled eggs, bacon, and whole wheat toast if you have it." "We sure do. That'll be right out for you." As Maya walked away to put in his order, she felt his eyes follow her, but not in a creepy way. It was more like he was observing, taking in the whole scene of the diner. She shrugged it off and went back to her routine. The man in the corner booth was polite and quiet. When she brought his coffee, he thanked her genuinely. When his food arrived, he complimented how good it looked. He seemed to be reading something on his phone, occasionally smiling at whatever he was looking at. Maya liked customers like him, the ones who were easy and didn't demand constant attention. They made her job feel less like work. By 10:15, the breakfast crowd had thinned out to just a handful of tables. Maya was wiping down the counter when Rosie emerged from the kitchen, her gray hair pulled back in its usual bun, her face slightly flushed from the heat of the grill. "How's it going out here, honey?" Rosie asked, surveying the dining room with the practiced eye of someone who'd been in the restaurant business her entire adult life. "Pretty smooth morning," Maya replied. The Henderson kids actually ate all their pancakes today without covering the table in syrup, so I'm calling that a win. Rosie laughed, that warm, throaty laugh that made everyone around her feel comfortable. Small miracles, right? You feeling ready for that test on Monday? Maya had mentioned her exam to Rosie earlier in the week. That was the thing about Rosie. She actually remembered the details of her employees' lives. She asked about Maya's classes, remembered when exams were coming up, and even once helped quiz her on medical terminology during a slow afternoon shift. As ready as I'm going to be, Maya said. I just keep reminding myself why I'm doing this. Every plate I carry, every difficult customer I smile at, it's all getting me closer to that degree. You're going to make an amazing nurse, Rosie said, patting Maya's hand. You've got that thing, you know? That way of making people feel cared for. Can't teach that. Before Maya could respond, the rumble of motorcycle engines cut through the quiet morning air. Both women turned toward the front windows as 5 motorcycles pulled into the parking lot, their chrome gleaming in the late morning sun. The riders parked in a row, taking up several spots. Maya felt a small knot form in her stomach, though she couldn't say exactly why. She'd served plenty of bikers before. Most of them were perfectly nice, just regular people who happened to ride motorcycles. But something about the way these men carried themselves as they dismounted their bikes made her uneasy. The group walked toward the diner entrance in a cluster, their leather vests adorned with various patches and insignias. The man in front was the biggest, probably in his mid-40s, with a thick beard that had streaks of gray running through it. His arms were covered in tattoos, and he wore dark sunglasses even though he was about to walk indoors. The bell above the door chimed as they entered, and the energy in the room shifted immediately. Conversations at other tables got a little quieter. The man in the corner booth looked up from his phone, his expression neutral but attentive. Maya grabbed a stack of menus and put on her best customer service smile. This was part of the job, she reminded herself. Treat everyone with respect, stay professional, and most people will respond in kind. That's what her grandmother had always taught her. Good morning, gentlemen, Maya said as she approached them, her voice friendly and welcoming. Just the 5 of you today? The big man in front, the one who was clearly the leader of the group, slowly removed his sunglasses. He looked Maya up and down in a way that made her skin prickle. It wasn't the look of someone checking out an attractive woman. It was something else. Something that felt like judgment, like assessment, like she was being sized up and found wanting. Yeah, 5, he said, his voice rough like gravel. We'll take that big table over there by the window. Maya nodded and started to walk toward the table he'd indicated, her stack of menus in hand. The group followed behind her, their boots heavy on the linoleum floor. She could feel their presence, could hear the quiet comments they were making to each other, though she couldn't make out the words. As she reached the table and began setting down menus, Maya was acutely aware of the silence that had fallen over the diner. The Henderson family was packing up to leave, the father throwing some bills on the table. Old Joe at the counter had stopped mid-bite, his fork suspended in the air. And the man in the corner booth had set his phone down completely, his full attention now on what was happening. Maya straightened up and pulled out her order pad, ready to take drink orders. Can I start you gentlemen off with some coffee? Or maybe you'd like to look at the menu first. The leader of the group sat down heavily in his chair, which creaked under his weight. He picked up the menu without looking at it, his eyes still fixed on Maya. Then he said something that made the air in the room feel suddenly thick and hard to breathe. Well, he said, loud enough for everyone in the diner to hear clearly. They really will let anybody serve food these days, won't they? Maya's smile froze on her face. Her hand tightened around her order pad. In the 3 years she'd been working here, she'd dealt with rude customers, impatient customers, customers who didn't tip, customers who complained about everything. But this was different. The way he said it, the way he was looking at her, the way his friends were starting to smirk. She knew exactly what was coming. And in that corner booth, a man in a baseball cap slowly put down his coffee cup, his jaw tightening as he watched a scene that was about to unfold, a scene that would change everything. Maya stood there, her pen hovering over her order pad, trying to process what she'd just heard. For a moment she thought maybe she'd misunderstood. Maybe he was talking about something else. But the way his friends were chuckling, the way he was staring at her with that cold expression, she knew there was no misunderstanding. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her head. Kill them with kindness, baby girl. When people try to drag you down, you rise above it. You show them what grace looks like. Maya took a slow breath and kept her voice steady. I'd be happy to help you, gentlemen, this morning. Can I start you off with some coffee or orange juice? The leader, whose name patch on his vest read Duke, leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms over his broad chest. You deaf or something? I said I don't want you serving us. One of his friends, a thinner man with a goatee and a bandana tied around his head, laughed and elbowed the guy next to him. Maybe she doesn't understand English, Duke. Oh, she understands, Duke said, his voice dripping with contempt. She just doesn't know her place yet. Maya felt heat rising in her cheeks. Her hand started to tremble slightly, so she gripped her pen tighter to hide it. She'd faced discrimination before. Little comments here and there, looks from people in stores, that feeling of being followed by security guards for no reason. But this was different. This was loud, public, and deliberately cruel. And it was happening in front of everyone. The Henderson family was already gone, having hustled their kids out the door the moment the tension started building. Old Joe at the counter was staring down at his plate now, uncomfortable but not saying anything. A couple in one of the other booths was whispering to each other, their breakfast forgotten. Sir, Maya said, and she was proud that her voice didn't shake. I'm the only server on duty right now, but if you'd prefer, I can get the owner. Rosie, she can help you herself. What I'd prefer, Duke said, standing up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor, is not to have someone like you touching my food. You got that? The words hung in the air like smoke. Maya felt something break inside her chest, that feeling when you realize that no matter how hard you work, how polite you are, how much you try, some people will never see past the color of your skin. She'd felt it before, but it never got easier. Someone like me, Maya repeated quietly, needing to hear him say it clearly, needing everyone in the diner to understand exactly what was happening here. Yeah, Duke said, stepping closer to her. Someone who doesn't belong in a place where decent people eat. You understand now, or do I need to spell it out more clearly? His friends were loving this. One of them, a stocky guy with a shaved head, actually pulled out his phone like he was going to record what happened next. Another one was practically bouncing in his seat with excitement, like watching someone get humiliated was the best entertainment he'd seen all week. Maya's eyes started to burn with tears, but she refused to let them fall. She would not give these men the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She would not let them win that way. I'm going to get Rosie, Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. She started to turn away, needing to escape before the tears came, before her composure cracked completely. That's right, run along, Duke called after her. Go back to the kitchen where you belong. Better yet, maybe you should just go back to wherever you came from. The man with the phone laughed. Dude, that's cold. Truth hurts, Duke said, settling back into his chair like he'd just done something to be proud of. Maya was halfway to the kitchen when Rosie burst through the swinging doors, her face flushed red with anger. She'd obviously heard everything from the kitchen. Rosie might be in her 60s and barely 5 feet tall, but in that moment, she looked like she could take on all 5 bikers single-handedly. What did you just say to my girl? Rosie demanded, marching straight toward Duke's table. Duke held up his hands in mock surrender. Easy there, Grandma. We're just trying to order breakfast. Don't you dare! Rosie said, her finger pointed at Duke like a weapon. I heard every word that came out of your mouth. You want to act like trash in my establishment? You can get out right now. We have every right to be here, Duke said, his voice hardening. This is a public business, isn't it? You can't discriminate against paying customers. The irony of him using that word, discrimination, wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Rosie planted her hands on her hips. I absolutely can refuse service to anyone who harasses my employees. That's my right as a business owner. So you can apologize to Maya right now, or you can leave. Your choice. Duke glanced at his friends, and Maya could see him calculating. He was clearly the alpha of this group, the one who made the decisions, and he didn't want to look weak in front of his crew. But he also wasn't expecting a 60-year-old woman to stand up to him so directly. We're not going anywhere, Duke said finally. We're hungry, we've been riding since dawn, and we want breakfast. Now, are you going to serve us, old woman? Or do we need to leave reviews online about how this dump treats its customers? Maya watched this exchange from near the kitchen doors, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. She felt powerless, humiliated, and angry all at once. Part of her wanted to just walk out, to leave through the back door and never come back. But another part of her knew that would be letting them win. Old Joe finally spoke up from the counter, his voice quiet but firm. "You ought to be ashamed of yourself, son. That young lady never did anything to you." Duke whipped around to face him. "Nobody asked you, old man. Mind your business." "It became my business when you started acting like a fool in public," Joe replied, and Maya was surprised by the steel in his voice. "I've been coming to this diner for 15 years, and Maya is one of the finest servers I've ever had anywhere. You're treating her like dirt for no reason except your own ignorance." "Ignorance?" Duke repeated, his voice rising. "I'm ignorant because I don't want certain people handling my food. That's just common sense where I come from." The couple in the other booth stood up quickly, the man throwing cash on the table. They hurried toward the exit without making eye contact with anyone, clearly wanting no part of whatever was about to happen. And that's when the man in the corner booth stood up. Maya had almost forgotten he was there. He'd been so quiet, so still, just watching everything unfold. But now he was on his feet, and even with the baseball cap pulled low, there was something commanding about his presence. He wasn't particularly tall, maybe 6 feet or so, but he was built like someone who spent serious time in the gym. His shoulders were broad, his arms were thick with muscle, and the way he carried himself suggested he was used to being in control of situations. He walked slowly toward Duke's table, and Maya noticed that his hands were relaxed at his sides, not clenched into fists, but there was definitely tension in his shoulders. When he got close enough, he stopped and just stood there for a moment, looking at Duke with an expression that was hard to read. "Is there a problem here?" the man asked, his voice deep and measured. Duke sized him up, clearly trying to decide if this was a threat he needed to worry about. "No problem at all, buddy. Just trying to get some breakfast without—" "I heard what you said to her," the man interrupted, gesturing toward Maya without taking his eyes off Duke. "Actually, I think everyone in this diner heard what you said, and I'm trying to understand what would make a grown man think it's okay to talk to someone like that." "Like I told everyone else," Duke said, standing up to face him directly. "This isn't your concern." The man reached up and removed his baseball cap, and that's when Maya saw his face clearly for the first time. Her breath caught in her throat. She knew exactly who he was. Everyone knew who he was. Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, one of the biggest movie stars in the world, was standing in Rosie's diner, confronting a biker who'd just spent the last 10 minutes humiliating her. Duke recognized him too. Maya saw the moment it clicked, saw his expression shift from confrontational to uncertain. But he was too committed now, too invested in maintaining his tough guy image in front of his friends. "Oh, look at this," Duke said, his voice taking on a mocking tone. "Hollywood pretty boy wants to play hero. What are you going to do, flex your muscles at me? Sign an autograph? This is real life, pal, not one of your movies." The Rock didn't rise to the bait. He just stood there, calm and solid, like a boulder that couldn't be moved. "You're right, this is real life. And in real life, I was raised by a strong woman who taught me to respect people. All people. She taught me that how you treat someone who can do nothing for you says everything about who you are as a person." He gestured toward Maya again. "This woman came to your table to do her job, to serve you with respect and professionalism. And you chose to attack her, to demean her, to make her feel less than human. Why? What did she do to you? What did she do to deserve that?" Duke's jaw clenched. "You don't know anything about me or where I come from." "You're right, I don't," The Rock acknowledged. "But I know what I just witnessed. And I know that what I saw was cowardice. Real strength isn't about putting other people down. Real strength is about lifting them up." One of Duke's friends, the one with the goatee, tugged on Duke's sleeve. "Man, come on. Let's just go to another place," but Duke shook him off. "No. We're not running from some actor who thinks he can tell us what to do." The Rock took a step closer, and though he wasn't being aggressive, there was something in his presence that filled the space. "I'm not telling you what to do. I'm asking you to do the right thing. Apologize to this young woman. Show her the respect she deserves. Show everyone here that you're capable of being a better man than the one you've been for the last 10 minutes. The tension in the diner was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Maya stood frozen, unable to believe this was actually happening. Rosie had moved closer, standing beside her protectively. Old Joe was still at the counter, watching with wide eyes. Duke looked around the room, seeming to finally notice that the guy with the phone had been recording this whole time. His face went a shade paler as the reality of the situation sank in. This wasn't just happening in some anonymous roadside diner anymore. This was being captured, documented, and probably already being uploaded somewhere. "This is ridiculous," Duke muttered, but his voice had lost some of its edge. "What's ridiculous?" The Rock said, his voice steady and clear. "Is a grown man who can't treat a waitress with basic human decency. What's ridiculous is thinking that the color of someone's skin determines their worth. What's ridiculous is that in 2024, we're still having to explain to people why racism is wrong." He let those words settle over the room before continuing. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize to Maya. A real apology, not some mumbled, half-hearted thing. Or you're going to leave. And if you leave without apologizing, then everyone who sees that video is going to know exactly what kind of man you are. Your choice." Maya's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She'd never had anyone stand up for her like this, especially not someone who didn't even know her. Tears were flowing freely now, but they were different tears than before. These weren't tears of humiliation. These were tears of gratitude, of relief, of feeling seen and valued after being made to feel invisible and worthless. Duke looked at his friends, at the Rock, at the phone still recording, and finally at Maya. For the first time since he'd walked in, he looked uncomfortable, uncertain, like maybe he was starting to realize he'd made a terrible mistake. The seconds stretched out like hours. Duke stood there, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he didn't want to say. His friends had gone quiet, all the bravado and laughter from earlier completely gone. The guy with the phone had lowered it slightly, but the red recording light was still blinking. Maya could see the war happening inside Duke. His pride was fighting against the growing realization that he'd backed himself into a corner with no good way out. His face was red, whether from anger or embarrassment, she couldn't tell. Maybe both. "I don't need a lecture from some Hollywood celebrity about how to act," Duke finally said, but his voice lacked the venom it had before. He sounded tired more than anything else, like a man who knew he'd already lost but wasn't ready to admit it yet. The Rock didn't back down. He stood his ground, his posture relaxed but firm. "This isn't about me being a celebrity. If I was a plumber, a teacher, or a guy who works at the gas station down the road, I'd still be standing here saying the exact same thing. Because this isn't about who I am. It's about who you choose to be in this moment." Rosie stepped forward then, her small frame somehow seeming larger than it should. "Duke Patterson," she said, and her use of his full name made him flinch slightly. "I've known your mama for 30 years. She used to bring you in here when you were just a little boy. Couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. You were polite back then. You'd say please and thank you. You'd hold the door for people." Duke's face darkened. "Don't bring my mother into this. Your mama would be ashamed of you right now," Rosie continued, her voice sharp as a knife. "Betty Patterson raised you better than this. And if she was standing here right now, she'd probably take you outside and whoop you like you were still a child, celebrity or no celebrity watching." Something in Duke's expression cracked at the mention of his mother. Maya saw it, the way his eyes got a little shiny, the way his shoulders dropped just slightly. It was like Rosie had found the one weak spot in his armor and pressed on it. The friend with the goatee spoke up again, his voice low and urgent. "Duke, man, this is getting out of hand. Let's just go. There's a truck stop 10 miles down the road." Another friend, the stocky bald one, nodded quickly. "Yeah, I'm starving. We can grab food somewhere else." But Duke shook his head stubbornly. "No, I'm not running away like some coward." "Then do the right thing," the Rock said simply. "Nobody's asking you to run away. We're asking you to stand up and be a man. A real man. The kind who can admit when he's wrong." Old Joe cleared his throat from the counter. "Son, I did 2 tours in Vietnam. I've seen men face down enemy fire without flinching. You know what real courage is? It's not about never being afraid or never making mistakes. It's about having the guts to make things right when you mess up. That's what separates the men from the boys." Duke looked around the room and Maya could see him taking it all in. The old veteran at the counter who'd seen real combat. The elderly diner owner who'd known his family for decades. The movie star who could have just kept eating his breakfast and ignored the whole thing. And Maya herself, still standing there with tears on her cheeks, waiting to see if this man had any decency in him at all. "This is crazy," Duke muttered, running his hand through his beard. "All this over some words." "Words matter," the Rock said firmly. "Words have power. They can lift people up or tear them down. And the words you chose to use today were meant to hurt, to diminish, to dehumanize. You can't just brush that off as some words. You made a choice to be cruel, and now you need to make a choice about what comes next. Maya found her voice then, surprising herself. It came out stronger than she expected. I'm standing right here. If you have something to say to me, say it to my face. Not to your friends, not to everyone else in this room. To me. Duke turned to look at her fully for the first time since this whole thing started. Really look at her. Not just seeing the color of her skin, but actually seeing her as a person. Maya held his gaze, refusing to look away. Refusing to make this easy for him. I work hard, Maya said. Her voice steady despite the emotions churning inside her. I'm putting myself through nursing school. I take care of my grandmother. I pay my bills. I treat every customer who walks through that door with respect, no matter who they are or what they look like. I didn't do anything to you. I just came to take your order. Her voice cracked slightly on that last sentence, and she had to pause to collect herself. You don't know anything about me except what you decided the moment you saw me. And you decided I wasn't worth basic human respect, that I didn't deserve to be treated with dignity, and I need you to understand something. That hurt. It really hurt. The room was completely silent. Even the normal sounds of the diner seemed to have stopped. The coffee maker wasn't gurgling. The clock on the wall seemed to have paused its ticking. Everyone was frozen, waiting. Duke's face went through a series of expressions. Anger, defensiveness, discomfort, and finally something that looked like shame. His shoulders slumped, and when he spoke, his voice was much quieter than before. He started, then stopped. He cleared his throat and tried again. I grew up in a certain way. My daddy, he had his opinions about things, about people, and I guess I never really questioned it. That's how it was in my house, in my town. Everybody thought the same way. The Rock shook his head. That's an explanation, not an excuse. Plenty of people grow up in households with bad ideas and choose to be better. You're a grown man. You don't get to blame your upbringing anymore. I know, Duke said, and he sounded defeated. I know that. He looked at Maya again, and this time there was something different in his eyes. Not warmth exactly, but maybe the beginning of understanding. I shouldn't have said those things to you. That wasn't right. Louder, the Rock said. She deserves to hear a real apology, not a mumble. Duke straightened his shoulders, and when he spoke again, his voice was clear enough for everyone to hear. Miss, I apologize for what I said to you. It was wrong of me to treat you that way. You didn't deserve it. I'm sorry. Maya felt something release in her chest, like a breath she'd been holding for too long. The apology wasn't perfect. It wasn't wrapped in a bow with a heartfelt explanation of sudden enlightenment, but it was real, and she could see in his face that it cost him something to say it. His pride, probably. Maybe some of his self-image as a tough guy who didn't back down. Thank you, Maya said quietly. I hope you mean it. I do, Duke said, and he seemed surprised by his own sincerity. I really do. I let my old ways of thinking control me, and that's not who I want to be. His friends were already edging toward the door, clearly ready to be anywhere else. Duke looked at them, then back at Maya and the Rock. We'll be going now. Actually, the Rock said, holding up a hand. Before you go, I want to say something to all of you. He looked at each of Duke's friends in turn. You guys stood there and laughed. You encouraged it. You pulled out your phone and recorded it like it was entertainment. That makes you just as responsible as he is. Maybe more because you could have stopped him and you didn't. The friends shuffled uncomfortably, unable to meet his eyes. When you see someone being mistreated and you do nothing, you're choosing a side, the Rock continued. Silence isn't neutral. Laughter isn't harmless. You guys need to think about that. Think about what kind of men you want to be and what kind of friends you want to have. The guy with the goatee looked genuinely ashamed. You're right. I should have said something. I'm sorry too, miss, the bald one nodded. Yeah, I'm sorry. The other two muttered their apologies as well, none of them able to look Maya in the eye. Duke pulled out his wallet and placed several $20 bills on the table. For your trouble, he said to Maya. And he gestured vaguely around the diner, disrupting your morning. Maya looked at the money. Easily $150, way more than any breakfast order would have cost. She didn't want to take it. It felt like blood money, like accepting payment for being humiliated. But then she thought about her tuition payment coming up, about her grandmother's medication, about the textbooks she needed for next semester. Thank you, she said, picking up the bills with trembling fingers. The 5 bikers filed out of the diner, their earlier swagger completely gone. They looked like kids leaving the principal's office after getting in serious trouble. The rumble of their motorcycles starting up was somehow less intimidating now, just loud engines and nothing more. As soon as the door closed behind them, the diner seemed to exhale collectively. Old Joe started clapping, his weathered hands coming together in slow, deliberate applause. Rosie joined in, and then The Rock, and even the cook who'd been watching from the kitchen window. Maya felt her knees go weak. The adrenaline that had been keeping her upright suddenly drained away, and she had to grab the back of a chair to steady herself. The tears came again, harder this time, all the fear and humiliation and relief pouring out at once. Rosie was there in an instant, wrapping her arms around Maya. "You're okay, honey. You're okay. It's over now." But Maya couldn't stop crying. It was like a dam had broken. She'd held it together through the whole confrontation, kept her composure, stayed strong. But now, in the safety of Rosie's embrace, she could finally let it out. The Rock approached them slowly, giving Maya space but wanting to check on her. "Hey," he said gently. "You did great. You stood up for yourself. That took real courage." Maya wiped at her face with her apron, trying to pull herself together. "I can't believe that just happened. I can't believe you. Thank you. Thank you so much. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," he said simply. "We all did. Every person in this room should have spoken up the moment he started. I'm just glad I was here." Old Joe came over from the counter, moving with the careful steps of someone whose joints had seen better days. He extended his hand to The Rock. "That was well done, young man. You've got a good heart." They shook hands, and The Rock smiled. "Just trying to do what's right, sir." Rosie released Maya from the hug, but kept one arm around her shoulders. "Baby, why don't you take a break? Go splash some water on your face. I can handle the floor for a bit." Maya shook her head. "No, I'm okay. I need to keep working. If I stop now, I'll just keep replaying it all in my head." "You sure?" Rosie asked, concerned. "I'm sure," Maya said, and she meant it. Work was her anchor, her way of keeping control when everything else felt chaotic. "Besides, I think this gentleman's coffee has gone cold. Let me get you a fresh cup." She looked at The Rock, managing a small smile. "On the house. It's the least I can do," he smiled back, warm and genuine.
"Only if you'll join me for a minute."
"I'd like to talk to you if that's okay." Maya nodded, grabbing the coffee pot. As she poured him a fresh cup at his corner booth, she felt something shift inside her. The morning had started like any other Saturday, routine and predictable. But nothing would be quite the same after this. Something had changed, not just in the diner but in her, and as she sat down across from one of the most famous people in the world, she realized that sometimes the most ordinary days can become extraordinary in ways you never expect. Maya slid into the booth across from The Rock, still feeling a bit surreal about the whole situation. She'd served thousands of customers over the years, but never anyone quite like this. Her hands were still shaking slightly as she set down the coffee pot, so she clasped them together in her lap where he couldn't see. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. Up close, without the baseball cap pulled low, he looked different than he did in movies. More real somehow. There were tiny lines around his eyes, and his expression carried a warmth that didn't always come through on screen. "I think so," Maya said honestly. "I'm still processing everything. 10 minutes ago I thought I was going to have the worst day of my life, and now I'm sitting here with you. It's a lot." He chuckled softly. "I'm just a guy who was having breakfast. Happened to be in the right place at the right time." "You're more than that," Maya said, finding her courage. "You didn't have to say anything. Most people wouldn't have. They would have just watched, maybe felt bad about it later, but in the moment, they would have stayed quiet." The Rock nodded slowly. "You're right, and that's a problem. We've normalized being bystanders. People pull out their phones to record instead of stepping in to help. They think someone else will handle it so they don't have to. But if everyone thinks that way, nobody does anything." Maya glanced toward the window where she could still see old Joe at the counter, now back to finishing his breakfast. Joe spoke up. "And Rosie, they're good people." "They are," he agreed. "And you know what? I bet there were other people in here who wanted to say something but didn't know how. Sometimes people just need someone to go first. To show them it's okay to stand up. That's all I did. I went first." Maya picked at a small tear in the vinyl booth seat, thinking about his words. "Can I ask you something? And you can tell me if it's too personal." "Go ahead. Have you ever been treated like that? Like less than human because of who you are or what you look like?" The Rock was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. I'm mixed race. My dad was black, my mom is Samoan. Growing up, I didn't always fit neatly into one box or another. Some black kids said I wasn't black enough. Some white kids made me feel like I didn't belong. And yeah, I've had people say things, make assumptions, treat me differently. He took a sip of his coffee before continuing. But here's the thing. Once I became famous, a lot of that changed. Not because people suddenly became less prejudiced, but because success and money have a way of making people overlook things they'd usually have a problem with. That's privilege in a way. I have a platform now, resources, protection. Most people don't. So when I see something like what happened to you today, I can't just sit there. I won't. Maya felt tears threatening again and blinked them back. I've been working here for 3 years. I've dealt with difficult customers, sure, but never anything like that. Never someone who just hated me on sight for no reason except nothing, The Rock said firmly. There is no except. There's no reason, no justification, no excuse. That man let hate live in his heart and it poisoned everything around him. But you know what I saw in him at the end? I saw someone who maybe, just maybe, realized how ugly that hate made him. Do you think he'll actually change? Maya asked. Or did he just apologize because you're famous and people were recording? It was a fair question, and The Rock seemed to consider it carefully. Honestly, I don't know. Change is hard. Real change, the kind that reaches deep down into how you were raised and what you believe. That takes time and effort. Some people never make it. But I believe people can change if they want to, if they choose to do the work. He leaned forward slightly. And here's something else. Even if Duke goes right back to his old ways tomorrow, even if nothing I said sticks with him, you know who else was in that diner today? His friends. They heard everything. They saw him get called out. They saw him have to apologize. Maybe one of them will think twice next time before laughing at someone else's pain. Maybe one of them has a kid at home and will realize he doesn't want to raise that kid the way he was raised. You never know what seeds get planted. Maya hadn't thought about it that way. She'd been so focused on Duke, on the immediate confrontation, that she hadn't considered the ripple effects. That's a nice way to think about it. It's the only way to think about it without losing your mind, The Rock said with a slight smile. If I focused on every person who's never going to change, I'd drive myself crazy. But if I focus on the possibility that standing up might help someone somewhere make a better choice, that keeps me going. Rosie appeared at the table with a plate of fresh pancakes. These are for you, honey, she said to Maya. You haven't eaten anything since you got here, and I know for a fact you probably skipped dinner last night studying. Maya started to protest. Rosie, I'm fine, I can eat later. Eat now, Rosie said in a tone that left no room for argument. She turned to The Rock. Can I get you anything else? More coffee, some pie? I make a mean apple pie if I do say so myself. The coffee's perfect, thank you, The Rock said. But I actually wanted to talk to you about something if you have a minute. Rosie slid into the booth next to Maya, curious. What's on your mind? The Rock pulled out his phone and opened up what looked like a payment app. I'd like to pay for everyone's meal this morning. Everyone who was here, everyone who comes in for the rest of the day. Whatever the total is, Rosie's eyes widened. You don't have to do that. That's very generous, but I want to, he said simply. Think of it as turning a bad morning into a good memory. Plus, I have a feeling you might lose some business today after what happened. People talk. Word spreads. I don't want you or Maya to suffer because some guy decided to act like a fool in your establishment. Maya felt overwhelmed. This is too much. You already did so much just by standing up for me. It's not too much, The Rock said. And honestly, this is the easy part. Writing a check, covering some meals, that's simple. What's hard is what you did. Standing there with grace and dignity while someone tried to tear you down. That's real strength. He turned his phone toward Rosie. So what do you say? Let me do this small thing. Rosie looked at Maya, who shrugged helplessly, then back at The Rock. Well, I'm not going to argue with a man who just defended one of my girls like a guardian angel. Thank you. This is incredibly kind. After Rosie headed back to the counter to ring up the transactions, The Rock and Maya sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Maya picked at her pancakes, discovering she was actually hungry despite everything. The food was warm and familiar, grounding her back in reality. Can I tell you something? Maya said between bites. When I first decided to go to nursing school, my grandmother asked me why. She said I was good at this job, good with people, and I could probably work my way up to manager eventually. Why take on all that debt and stress for nursing? What did you tell her? The Rock asked. I told her that serving people food was good work, honest work, and I'd never be ashamed of it. But I wanted to serve people in a different way. I wanted to help people on their worst days when they're sick or scared or in pain. I wanted to be the person who could make a difference when it really matters. Maya paused, her voice getting quieter. But today, when that man was saying those things, I felt small. I felt like maybe I was stupid for dreaming bigger. Like maybe people like him would always see me as less than, no matter what degree I got or how hard I worked. The Rock reached across the table and tapped the table gently to get her attention. Hey, look at me. You listen to me right now, okay? That degree you're working toward? You're going to get it, and you're going to be an amazing nurse because you already have the most important thing, the thing they can't teach in school. You have compassion. You have heart. You have the ability to keep your grace even when someone's trying to steal it from you. He smiled. Plus, let's be real. After handling customers like Duke, dealing with difficult patients is going to feel like a walk in the park. That made Maya laugh. Really laugh, for the first time since the whole ordeal started. That's true. I guess this was practice for dealing with people on their worst behavior. Exactly, The Rock said. And you passed the test with flying colors. Old Joe shuffled over to their booth, his check in his weathered hand. I'm heading out, but I wanted to say something before I go. He looked at Maya. Young lady, I've been watching you work here for a long time. You're good people. Don't you ever let anyone make you feel otherwise. And you, he turned to The Rock, you're all right in my book. Need more folks like you willing to speak up. They shook hands again, and Joe made his way to the door, stopping to say goodbye to Rosie at the register. The Rock glanced at his watch. I should probably get going soon, too. I've got a flight to catch in a few hours. Maya felt a sudden panic. Wait, before you go, can I ask you one more thing? Of course. She pulled out her order pad and wrote something on it, then carefully tore off the page and slid it across to him. It was her information. Her full name, her phone number, her email address, and the name of her nursing school. I know this might sound crazy, Maya said, her cheeks warming, but would you be willing to maybe check in sometime? Like, not in a weird way, but just, I'm going to remember this day for the rest of my life. What you did for me, and I think knowing that someone like you believed in me, it would help on the hard days. The days when I'm studying until 3 in the morning or working a double shift and wondering if I can actually do this. The Rock looked at the paper, then at Maya, and his expression softened. You know what? I'm going to do you one better. He pulled out his wallet and retrieved a business card. This is my assistant's contact information. When you graduate, and notice I said when, not if, you call that number. The Rock Foundation helps support people pursuing careers in healthcare and education. We can help with student loans, job placement, whatever you need. Maya stared at the card in disbelief. Are you serious right now? Completely serious, he said. You've got the drive and the heart. We just want to help with the financial part so you can focus on becoming the nurse you're meant to be. The tears came again, but Maya didn't try to hide them this time. I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't seem like enough. Thank you is perfect, The Rock said, standing up from the booth. And hey, do me a favor. When you're a nurse someday and you see another healthcare worker getting treated badly, you remember today. You remember that standing up matters. Then you do for them what I did for you. That's how we change things, one person at a time. Maya stood too, and without thinking about it, gave him a hug. He hugged her back, and in that moment she felt like maybe everything was going to be okay. More than okay, even. Maybe something good could actually come from this awful morning. As The Rock headed toward the door, several other customers who'd been pretending not to watch the whole exchange broke into applause. He waved, signed a couple of quick autographs, and then he was gone just like that. The diner suddenly felt emptier without his presence. Maya stood there holding his assistant's business card like it was made of gold. Rosie came up beside her and put an arm around her waist. Well, Rosie said, that was quite a morning. Yeah, Maya agreed. It really was. What neither of them knew was that outside multiple people had already posted their videos and photos online. The story was already spreading across social media like wildfire. By the time Maya finished her shift and checked her phone, she'd have dozens of messages from friends and family who'd seen the videos. News outlets would be calling. People from all over would be reaching out with support. with their own stories, with offers to help. But in that moment, standing in Rosie's diner with syrup-sticky tables to clean and coffee to pour, Maya just felt grateful. Grateful for the rock, for Rosie, for old Joe, and for discovering that even on the worst days there are still good people in the world willing to stand up for what's right.